What's up, guys? Welcome back to Legit Street Cars. My name is Alex, and in today's video, I'm going to try my best to make sure that the pistons in the wonderful 99 C43 don't end up like this, because this was kind of expensive to fix. If you're new to the channel, then welcome. We are on the way to 100,000 subscribers, which is amazing. So if you'd consider subscribing to the channel, that would be awesome. This, of course, is my 1999 C43 AMG, and I only paid $200 for this car. And recently, I've come to the conclusion that this car needs a very cheap boost in horsepower. And what better way to boost the horsepower in any car than by adding nitrous? And not boost, well, because boost is like really expensive. Now, the fine folks at Zek sent me out their blackout nitrous kit, and don't tell them, let's keep this between us, but had they not sponsored this channel with a nitrous system, this is the exact one I would have bought anyway, primarily because of this. This is a control module, and the nitrous and the fuel go through this box before it reaches your engine, and it's able to monitor the pressure in the bottle. This way, it adjusts the amount of fuel that enters the engine so you don't go lean or too rich and cause any damage. This is a really cool safety feature that I wish I had on many different nitrous kits that I've installed in the past and ran on my cars. So I'll go over this entire kit in a future video, but they sent me everything. We have the nozzle, the jets, the switches, the wiring, the hoses. I have a purge valve, I have a bottle heater, and my favorite part is this super sweet velvet blanket slash sleeve for the bottle. This is going to be like the nicest part of the C43, and of course, I got an awesome t-shirt. Before we install any kind of nitrous on the C43, there are a few safety and maintenance items that I want to install on the car, again, so our engine doesn't murder itself. Alright, before we get to installing any of this stuff on the C43, we have to briefly talk about why modified engines, whether they are run on nitrous or boost, blow up in the first place. And this can be a very lengthy discussion, so I've narrowed it down to the top two engine killers: pre-ignition and detonation. We're going to start off with pre-ignition first, and that is the reason I believe I melted these two pistons, which came from two separate forged LS1 engines in my turbo Trans Am. Now, these engines were not run on nitrous, but rather with boost pressure from a turbocharger, and this was kind of the result of 93 octane pump gas, a ton of boost and timing, and a really hot day. But the theory still applies with nitrous cars, so let's talk pre-ignition. Pre-ignition occurs as the piston is moving upwards during the compression stroke. Now, before an air-fuel mixture is compressed, it's actually very easy to ignite. It gets progressively harder to ignite as the piston moves upwards and creates cylinder pressure. This is why cars require a very high output ignition system. If the air-fuel mixture ignites before it's supposed to, this will not only throw off the balance of the entire engine, but it will create a tremendous amount of heat and cylinder pressure because you still have a piston traveling upwards, now trying to compress an expanding gas. So pre-ignition does not get detected by the knock sensor, so there's really not much you can do about it. If you have pre-ignition, you can almost certainly bet that you are going to destroy your engine almost immediately. With these two separate engines, they made it about a halfway down the quarter-mile drag strip before this happened. This also took out the rod, and basically the entire engine as metal goes everywhere. So you don't want pre-ignition. Now, some people think that detonation and pre-ignition are the same thing, but they're not. Pre-ignition occurs before the spark plug is able to ignite the air-fuel mixture, where detonation occurs after the spark plug has ignited the air-fuel mixture when it's supposed to. With detonation, you can kind of think of this as a second mini explosion during the normal combustion process. So you have your primary controlled combustion, and then a second mini spontaneous combustion of the air-fuel ratio around the edge of the piston. Now, when these two flame fronts happen at the same time, they kind of compete for space and cause an increase in cylinder pressure. This can be kind of like a hammering effect on the piston and subsequently the rods, the bearings, and the crank. This can also break a piston, usually by the ringland, kind of like this one right here. Now, detonation is normally caused by too much ignition timing, running too much boost, too much heat, and and also a lean air-fuel ratio, which can increase the cylinder temperature and pressure. You can live with a little bit of detonation, and with most modern cars, the knock sensors will pick it up and cause the car's computer to reduce the timing, but it's still something you definitely don't want, especially if you want your engine to last a really long time. All right, guys, let's take a look at some parts. Now, I will be doing some normal maintenance to the C43 before we start going crazy with nitrous. So I'll be cleaning out the throttle body, the mass airflow sensor, replacing the fuel filter, and installing these new high flow air filters. But for safety purposes, we're going to be installing new spark plugs and a new inline fuel pump. And the air filters, the fuel pump, and the spark plugs came from Victory Road Performance in Virginia. These guys have been helping me feed my horsepower addiction for over a year now. So if you're fiending for some power, definitely check out their link in the video description box. We're gonna kick off this party with the spark plugs. These might look like normal NGK spark plugs, but they're actually one step colder. So what does that mean? Let me explain. Spark plugs come in many different heat ranges, and auto manufacturers typically choose the hottest plug they can run without experiencing pre-ignition, and this is for emissions and efficiency purposes. Now, when you hear the term colder spark plug, it isn't referring to the temperature of the spark, but rather how quickly it can dissipate the heat into the cylinder head. Remember when I said pre-ignition is when the combustion occurs before the spark initiates the burn? Well, one way that can happen is when a spark plug tip starts to glow from inadequate heat transfer. When you add more boost, compression, or nitrous, you're adding more heat and cylinder pressure, which means you need a colder spark plug that can fight off the heat and therefore prevent engine-killing pre-ignition.
Exit for 3!
So in short, you don't want a few dollars worth of spark plugs to be the reason why you pre-ignited and completely destroyed your engine. So with the spark plugs out of the way, we are moving on to this little guy right here. This is a Walbro 255 liter per hour inline fuel pump. And this pump right here, this little tiny pump, is good for about 500 horsepower worth of fuel. Well, I'd like to say that I'm surprised, but I'm not. This is totally hacked up. Look at the bracketry holding together the fuel pump and the fuel filter, and we have a little fuel leak right here as well, so I'm glad I'm putting a new one on. But either way, I'll have to kind of rig this one on there, but check it out, this pump is actually a little bit smaller, but the flow faces the same way. The electrical connectors look like they're gonna swap right over. All I have to do is get a 90-degree elbow right here, and then a larger barb fitting for the main feed from the tank. But yeah, what's really nice about these old Mercedes is that they still run an inline fuel pump, so when you're putting nitrous on them like most people do, it's super easy. The nitrous kit I'm using is referred to a wet nitrous system. This is opposed to a dry kit that sprays nitrous onto your factory mass airflow sensor and relies on the engine computer and injectors to add more fuel due to more air. With a wet kit, you're using a nitrous jet and a separate fuel jet, so you can kind of think of this as an additional fuel injector. You normally tap into the fuel rail to feed that jet, and considering that in my case, it's gonna be feeding that jet with an additional 100 horsepower worth of fuel, a bigger fuel pump is needed so we don't go lean. If you run an engine too lean, it gets hot, and with more heat, you get a spontaneous combustion of the air-fuel mixture and cause, you guessed it, detonation, and ain't nobody got time for that. With spark and fuel out of the way, we have to talk about something that I think is absolutely needed on any nitrous-powered or boosted engine, and that is a way of monitoring your air-fuel mixture. Now, we talked about how a lean air-fuel ratio can cause detonation and engine damage, but how do you monitor your air-fuel ratio live while you're making a pass at the track or a pull on the dyno? Well, you use one of these, a wideband O2 sensor welded into your exhaust and a gauge mounted somewhere in your peripheral vision so that if you notice it's running lean, you can immediately lift out of the throttle and potentially save your engine. And I've done this. And for the record, the melted pistons from the Trans Am engines, well, that was from about a decade ago using a totally different tuner and a different wideband system. Since I've been tuning the car myself with this AEM, I've never melted down a piston, knock on my table, a big knock, because these engines are very expensive. But what I really like about this kit, and the reason why I use it on the Trans Am and on the E55, is that first off, it's very inexpensive and very accurate. I've actually tested this against much more expensive wideband systems, and it reads the exact same number. Another thing is the install is insanely easy. There's just 2 plugs at the back of the control module, which also acts as the digital gauge, and you can switch from air fuel to lambda as well. And then most of us will just require a power and ground hookup. And then if you want a data log against things like RPM and boost pressure with your laptop, there's a wire for that as well. You get this welded into your exhaust, and you are good to go and well on your way to not blowing your engine up for less than $200. And I'll leave a link in the video description down below on where you can buy one of these. And this is the latest one, the 30-0300 part number. That is the one you want. If only I could use one of the 5 gauge pod holders that one of the 10 previous owners installed in the C43, except that they are all very low, and I wouldn't realistically be able to watch this as I'm making a pass. So I might do something similar to the E55 and mount it over here in the vent, or maybe in one of these vents, or I could possibly stick something to this part of the dash, as one of the previous owners ruined this as well. Let me know in the comment section down below, where should I mount the AEM wideband? Maybe I should just put it on the steering wheel like my GoPro. There we go. Done. Alright guys, that will do it as far as safety items that I'll be installing on the C43 to make sure it doesn't go kaplooey. Now of course, luck plays a factor here, so it still may blow up, but we're going to try our best so that that doesn't happen. Now I just have a few things to finish up with that fuel pump. I took the pump and the filter off. I have to replace all the hoses, they're very dry rotted, get some fittings for the pump, and then try and unhackify that mess back there with all the zip ties. But something I wanted to mention to you guys as well is tuning. Tuning is very important with boosted applications and nitrous injected engines, except when you're dealing with a wet kit on a stock engine. Now, if the engine is putting out the proper AFR the way it is, then the properly jetted nitrous system, especially with a control module that's monitoring bottle pressure and adjusting fueling accordingly, you shouldn't really need that many tweaks as far as fueling, but we're going to find out with the wideband. I'm also going to be monitoring for knock, and if it is knocking, I might need to reduce the ignition timing a little bit, and Tony over at Race IQ can actually tune these old things. He can do an engine tune and a transmission tune, and I'm working on a deal for all of you guys, the legit Street Car subscribers, on a discount code for tuning, so stay tuned for my next video, which will be on the E55 at the dyno. Finally. With that being said, I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. If you did, hit the thumbs up button, subscribe if you're new. I hope that all of you have an awesome day, and I'll see you all in the next video. This is a 2005 Mercedes-Benz CL65 AMG, and what? Okay, I guess. Meet Frank Focus. He bought his Focus RS brand spanking new, and he's the happiest guy in the world. I'm the happiest guy in the world.